Testing, testicular. Alrighty. Let's see what we can go over today. Don't be shocked by my vagina face. Okay. Damn it, this looks gross. You fucking angles. Okay, I think we're okay. Click out of that. All right, let's start.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The U.S. dropped 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs hitting a large ammunition depot in the Iranian city of Isfahan Monday. President Trump posted a video of the massive explosions on Truth Social.
Ooh,
it comes as Trump warned the U.S. would obliterate Iran's energy plants and oil wells if Iran does not reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Trump also threatened to strike Iran's desalination plants, which is a war crime.
Watch that be fake news. Oh. What is this? What now? Suggestion the audio stream current. The audio bitrate is 0. More than the recommended bitrate will make a man an Ayooo. 128. You don't say. Hold on. Give me a moment. Stream output audio. I have no clue what you're talking about. Output. Oh. Audio. Where do I even check that? General. Well, now it's excellent. Okay. Okay, buddy, go fuck yourself. We're good.
Iran said it had received U.S. ceasefire proposals via intermediaries following talks Sunday between the foreign ministers of Pakistan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. The Iranian foreign ministry said the proposals were, quote, unrealistic, illogical, and excessive, unquote. Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund warned Monday the U.S.-Israeli war in Iran is driving higher prices and slower growth worldwide. Here in the U.S., gas prices hit $4 a gallon for the first time since 2022. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt suggested President Trump could soon ask Arab nations to pay for the conflict.
Back during the Persian Gulf War, 1990, 1991, Arab countries paid for the vast majority of the cost of the war. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. Who's paying for the cost of this war? Will those Arab countries step up to do just that?
Well, I think it's something the president would be quite interested in calling them to do. I won't get ahead of him on that, but certainly it's an idea that I know that he has and something that I think you'll hear more from him on.
Meanwhile, the New York Times reports the U.S. military debuted a new weapon called the Precision Strike Missile when it struck a sports hall and a school in southern Iran February 28th. The attack killed at least 21 people, including young girls playing volleyball, according to local officials. The Precision Strike Missile is barely out of the prototype phase, and the U.S. Army has not yet created an official entry for it in the military supply system.
I saw that on fucking Twitter. Didn't think it was real.
To a consortium of human rights groups in Iran, nearly 1,500 Iranian civilians, at least 217 of them children, have been killed in U.S. and Israeli strikes. U.S. airstrikes have hit 20 universities and dormitories across Iran, according to Iranian state media. Videos posted March 28th and 29th showed the aftermath of an attack on the Iran University of Science and Technology in Tehran, where an entire building was reduced to rubble. A few days before, Dr. Saeed Shamgadri, a professor at the university, and 2 of his children were killed in a strike on their home in northern Tehran. A strike on a research institute at Isfahan University of Technology damaged several buildings and injured 4 staff members, according to Iranian state media. Other universities hit include the Faculty of Pharmacy at Shiraz University and 2 campuses at Urmia University in northeastern Iran, according to United Students, a group run by student activists. Iran has vowed to retaliate against U.S. university campuses in the region. NYU has closed its Abu Dhabi campus after Iranian leaders declared outposts of U.S. universities as, quote, legitimate targets, unquote. Iran struck a fully loaded crude oil tanker near Dubai Monday, setting the vessel on fire. Meanwhile, Turkey reported a ballistic missile launch from Iran entered Turkish airspace before being shot down by NATO air and missile defenses. It comes as Human Rights Watch released a report Monday finding Iran fired cluster munitions at Israel, calling the strikes unlawful. The cluster bombs killed at least 4 civilians, according to HRW. Israel's parliament, the Knesset, on Monday, passed a law approving the death penalty for Palestinians convicted of murdering Israelis. The law makes death by hanging the default sentence for Palestinians in the occupied West Bank convicted of killing Israelis. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu came to the Knesset to cast his vote for the bill in person. Far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who spearheaded the legislation, celebrated its passage by toasting lawmakers.
This is
Sarit Mikhaili of B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights group.
This law violates both the laws of occupation that place severe restrictions on the ability of placing the death sentence on by the occupying power against the occupied population, but also is discriminatory because Israeli Jews who live in the occupied territories, Israeli settlers, will not face any sort of death penalty in the rare occurrence that they might actually be convicted, tried or convicted of any sort of offences, and certainly not the killing of Palestinians.
The Association for Civil Rights in Israel petitioned Israel's Supreme Court to strike down the law minutes after it passed, calling it discriminatory by design, unquote. The foreign ministers of Australia, Britain, France, Germany, and Italy had urged Israel to abandon the measure. Israel's not executed anyone since Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann in 1962. Hundreds of Palestinians have died in Israeli prisons due to torture and other inhumane conditions, while the United Nations condemned the killing of Palestinians by Israeli soldiers as extrajudicial executions. The Palestinian-American activist Nardine Kiswani spoke outside New York City Hall on Monday after the NYPD foiled an assassination attempt against her. A New Jersey man, Alexander Heifler, has been arrested and charged with plotting to firebomb Kiswani's home in Brooklyn. Investigators say Heifler was a member of the JDL 613 Brotherhood, a New Jersey-based group founded in 2024 that described itself as a revival of the Jewish Defense League, a pro-Israel group designated by the FBI as a terrorist organization. Democracy Now! Was at the news conference yesterday with Kiswani and her lawyers.
And today I am standing here not just as an organizer, but as a mother, as a Palestinian, and as someone who was a target of a Zionist assassination plot that I have been warning has been inevitable for far too long. When I learned that someone was preparing to attack my home, building explosives with the intention of taking my life.
To see our interview with Nardine Kiswani yesterday on Democracy Now!, go to democracynow.org. Socialist activist and documentary filmmaker Avi Lewis has been elected to lead Canada's new Democratic Party, NDP, as Canada's main progressive party seeks to rebuild itself following a devastating defeat in last year's federal election. Lewis, who is Jewish and a vocal critic of Israel, campaigned on a platform of affordability and equity, promising higher wealth taxes. Last year, Canada's Liberal Party soared in popularity as President Trump intensified his threats to make Canada the 51st state and impose tariffs. Voters flocked to elect the Liberal Party's Mark Carney as Prime Minister, with the new Democratic Party winning under 10 seats in Parliament. The disastrous election outcome forced the departure of former NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. In his victory speech, Avi Lewis condemned what he described as Israel's genocide in Gaza, saying, quote, "We call it by its name, and we do everything in our power to bring it to an end," unquote. Avi Lewis is married to renowned Canadian author, journalist, and activist Naomi Klein. In Sudan, a new report by Doctors Without Borders warns rape and sexual violence remain, quote, part of everyday life. across the Darfur region as the war between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese military nears 3 years. Child rape is particularly rampant, with both parties accused of war crimes. MSF's report outlines the testimonies of over 3,000 survivors of sexual violence who sought medical care at MSF-backed clinics between January 2024 and November 2025. MSF said its report only reflects a fraction of widespread sexual violence in Sudan, and that, quote, this war is being fought on the backs and bodies of women and girls. Displacement, collapsing community support systems, lack of access to health care, and deep-rooted gender inequalities are allowing these abuses to continue across Sudan, unquote. This comes as the UN reports at least 7 people were killed in an airstrike on a funeral gathering in West Kordofan. In South Sudan, at least 70 people were killed when gunmen attacked a gold mine in central Equatorial State, where violent clashes have intensified over illegal mining. Video footage shared online showed dozens of bodies on the ground, covered in blankets. As many survivors were forced to hide in the bushes. The Sudan People's Liberation...
This is crazy because we don't even talk about this. Like, we don't... It's like... Oh, that's cool. We don't even talk about it. That's another crazy, people are dying every day. Just another atrocity that humans commit. I don't know if people don't talk about it as much because they're black, or is it because it's black on black crime? Or I think it's just people don't give a fuck as much. It's just so much, man. It's too much. Too many things happening around the world. You know what I mean?
Movement Army blamed the attack on South Sudanese government forces. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum is demanding answers after a Mexican immigrant died in ICE custody last week. Jose Guadalupe Ramos was detained at the troubled Atlanta ICE jail in California. He's at least the 14th person to die in ICE custody since January. This is President Sheinbaum speaking from Mexico City.
We're going to take several steps to protest the death of yet another Mexican national in the United States. Particularly in this detention center in Los Angeles has had several deaths. A thematic hearing will be presented before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights regarding people who have died in ICE detention centers.
In Haiti, at least 70 people have been reportedly killed as armed gangs descended on the western Artibonite region, setting homes on fire and displacing thousands of residents in attacks Sunday and Monday. Video footage showed scores of bloodied bodies scattered in the streets. UN officials have expressed alarm over the latest gang-related massacre. This comes as a UN-backed so-called gang suppression force is expected to deploy to Haiti in April, despite many Haitians denouncing the efforts as a new form of occupation. The Trump administration's vowed to continue its energy blockade on Cuba even after U.S. officials allowed a Russian oil tanker to deliver fuel to the island. The U.S. blockade has caused frequent, widespread blackouts across Cuba, with hospitals, universities, and other public services on the near brink of collapse. Before the arrival of Russia's oil tanker, Cuba had not received any fuel in more than 3 months. This is Havana resident Ismael de la Cruz Caballero.
I see the arrival of the ship and the fact that they allowed it in very positively. However, we need them to let more shipments through. After all, a single ship amounts to just over 75,000 barrels, and that lasts only 15 days. What happens after that? We'll be right back to the blackouts and the transportation crisis.
I thought it was 700,000.
Later in the broadcast, we'll speak with an independent journalist in Havana and Professor William Leogrand, co-author of Back Channel to Cuba, the hidden history of negotiations between Washington and Havana. And the Trump administration's move to allow riskier alternative investments such as private equity and cryptocurrencies to be included in 401k retirement accounts. Dennis Kelleher, chief executive of Better Markets, a nonprofit advocacy group, said, quote, the legal immunity created by the safe harbor will incentivize financial advisors to pitch these toxic products, which will become ticking time bombs and tens of millions of retirement accounts, unquote. The Department of Labor will open a 60-day public comment period before deciding whether to finalize the rule. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast,
Let's now take a look at some of the day's other global headlines. And Israel has passed legislation that now imposes the death penalty as the default punishment for Palestinians convicted of killing Israelis. The bill passed with 62 votes in favor. The man behind the bill is far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who was seen celebrating after the vote with a bottle of champagne inside the chamber. It's prompted criticism from the foreign ministers of Germany, the Netherlands, France, Italy and the UK. While the law comes into effect in 30 days, the legislation could still be struck down by the Supreme Court. As Noor O'Day explains from Ramallah, the law is intended to target Palestinians.
It is imposed on a specific group, and hence the discriminatory part of it, Neve. Now, this law has been the subject of much debate since it was first legislated. And I have to say that it wasn't just proposed by Itamar Ben-Gvir. He had support even from the opposition. So there is no point of principled opposition to this law. Some of the objections we heard during the discussions had to do with technicalities, with political points and scoring points, like Benny Gantz, for example, a former Minister of Defense and a prominent opposition figure who objected to this bill, not because he opposed killing Palestinians, because in his words, I've killed more Palestinian so-called terrorists than all the members in the plenum today, but his point of objection was that this would be helping Itamar Ben-Gvir. Now, this law will be challenged in Israel's High Court. Human rights organizations and two Palestinian and Israeli parliamentary blocs will be challenging this law. But the fact that it passed, the fact that the Israeli Prime Minister voted in favor of it despite international objections, the fact that the discussion around it was not about discrimination.
To discuss this further, we're now joined by Suhad Bishara, who's the legal director of Adala, an independent human rights organization and legal center in Israel. She's live from Berlin. Thank you so much, Suhad, for your time. What is your reaction first to Israel's passage of this new death penalty law? How do you view its timing and its intent?
I mean, it's very worrying, but let's keep in mind, of course, the timing is not coincidental. However, let's keep in mind that the death penalty law was part of the coalition agreements signed between Jewish Power and the Likud in December 2022. So this was expected somehow in this regard. And I think the past events in the past 2 years just accelerated this process tremendously. It is a very worrying law for many reasons. One, death penalty in and by itself is inhuman, it's cruel. It runs against international trends. Most countries in the world have abolished, either formally or de facto, death penalty. The UN observers have recommended to all countries to abolish. We have seen all European countries abolished based on the European Convention on Human Rights. So Israel is going against all of these trends, against the international law in this regard. A second matter regarding this law, that it is designed in a way that it encompasses only Palestinians, in the sense that if you have, let's say, a Jewish Israeli citizen who commits an intended killing against a group of Palestinians, regarding whether we're talking about in the occupied Palestinian territories, in Israel itself, under what is defined under Israeli law as a terror act, he or she won't be under the threat of death penalty, because the law says that these offenses need to be within the scope or the aim to negate the existence of the state of Israel.
Very important that you highlight that distinction. What I also find very worrying here is that, as you said, this will target Palestinian prisoners only, but these are also prisoners who, in many cases, haven't had a fair trial, weren't given due process, right?
Look at these fucking animals.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if we're talking about Palestinians in the West Bank, these are mostly tried in the military courts in the West Bank, a process that lacks minimum guarantees for fair trial. The percentage of convictions is above 99% in the military courts, while Israeli settlers are tried under Israeli law in Israeli civil courts. So you have a very clear distinction in this regard.
The timing, you said, is also very significant, Suhad. This comes amid intensified violence, settler violence in the occupied West Bank, mass arrests also there, and also Israel's war on Gaza, which is continuing despite a ceasefire, which is said to be in effect there. Do you see this law as part of a deliberate strategy of wider repression on Palestinians?
I mean, definitely. I don't think we can read this law out of context. I mean, there is a wider context of what's happening in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. I mean, most of the crimes committed by Israeli settlers in the West Bank towards Palestinians are not tried. People are not convicted. People are not brought to court. And there is a general system of impunity that protects against all of these crimes. And this law comes and says, we will continue with that. We will continue with trying Palestinians in a separate manner, in a different manner, in a differentiated manner, while supporting and continuing to grant impunity to any Israeli perpetrators in this regard. The law is very worrying.
Right.
It's one of the most racist laws that were enacted so far. We identified as it has very clear foundations of an apartheid law. We petitioned last night to the Israeli Supreme Court, and we hope that we will manage to cancel it.
I was going to ask you about that. The Association for Civil Rights in Israel has already filed an appeal to the Supreme Court. Do you have any faith in the Israeli legal system and legal institutions to reverse this measure?
Yeah, two petitions were filed before the Supreme Court yesterday, including the Israeli human rights organizations, Adala, and some parliament members. I'm hopeful in the sense that we have very strong legal grounds against the law in terms of its constitutionality or unconstitutionality, and in terms of international law. It is the first law that is enacted that applies directly to the Palestinians in the West Bank. Again, we're speaking about occupied territory. Israeli parliament is not the sovereign and has no power and no authority to enact laws that apply to the Palestinians in the West Bank. So I think there is a good chance that it will be cancelled.
Thank you so much for talking to us. We appreciate your time. That was Suhad. The man behind the bill is far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who was seen celebrating after the vote with a bottle of champagne inside the chamber. It's prompted criticism from the foreign ministers of Germany, the Netherlands, France, Italy, and the UK. While the law comes into effect in 30 days, the legislation could still be struck down by the Supreme Court. As Noor O'Day explains from Ramallah, the law is intended to target Palestinians.
I don't know what else to say. Like, these people are demons, not this lady. Or these fucking guys, bro. These people are demons. These are truly evil, disgusting, just wow, evil people. These are it right here. Not the Palestinians. This just opens the door to, like, straight up, you know, concentration, Holocaust style camps, where they're not going to care if Palestinians actually did anything. They're just going to lock them up and mass kill them, just stack bodies. Like, look up anything like about the Holocaust and how many people they killed. It's going to be just like that, bro. If this passes, these demons are going to do what the Germans did to them. I don't understand how you can go from being the victims of Nazis to being Nazis. I just, ugh.
Back, we are following breaking news. A verdict in the landmark case addressing the power and influence of social media. A Los Angeles jury today finding Meta and YouTube negligent in the design or operation of their platforms and saying the companies failed to warn users of the dangers of their services. The jurors found that the tech giant's platforms harmed a young user with features that made her addicted and led to mental health problems. The trial, which included testimony from Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, was the first lawsuit of its kind to go to trial. In separate statements, Meta and Google, YouTube's parent company, saying they disagree with today's verdict and plan to appeal. Today's verdict comes just one day after a jury in New Mexico ordered Meta to pay $375 million after determining that Meta concealed what it knew about child sexual exploitation on its platform. Meta says it plans to appeal that verdict as well. Joining me now is Jacob Ward, veteran technology journalist and host of the Rip Current podcast. He's also the author of The Loop, How Technology is Creating a World Without Choice and How to Fight Back. Jacob, thanks so much for joining me. So let's talk about today's big verdict. What was your big takeaway?
Well, Kristen, this is really, I mean,
I think they should start with like better credentials, not that they're podcasters, because that's like slowly not, that doesn't mean anything. I could start a podcast, you know, this could be a fucking podcast and I'm nobody. Maybe you should start with he's an author of a, he's a fucking journalist. Why would you start saying he's a podcaster instead of saying journalist? I
really think that this is
sexual exploitation on its platform. Meta says it plans to appeal that verdict as well. Joining me now is Jacob Ward, veteran technology journalist and host of the Rip Current podcast. He's also the author of The Loop, How Technology is Creating a World Without Choice and How to Fight Back. Jacob, thanks so much for joining me. So let's talk about today's big verdict. What was your big takeaway?
Well, Kristen, this is really, I mean, for me, it is I get goosebumps as I say it. It is truly a historic moment. I really think that this is on a par with figuring out that cigarettes cause cancer or that we need to have seatbelts in cars. This is a huge societal shift that we're seeing unfolding in front of us really in real time. And as a result, you know, I think this is the end of social media as we know it, and it is definitely the end of childhood as we have come to accept it. We are seeing for the very first time a social media company found liable, in this case, two of them found liable for the design choices they made and for, as a result, addicting kids in a harmful way to their product. This is something that was unimaginable even a few years ago because these companies have enjoyed such powerful legal protections until now. Now this new legal theory opens up an entirely new can of worms, one that consists of more than 1,600 cases that are now going to come down on one or more of these companies, Kristen.
Wow. Well, it's really striking to hear you describe it in that context, Jacob. So paint a picture for me. You say this is the end of social media as we know it. What does that look like in our society?
Well, until now, right, we've treated our attention and by extension our behavior as, first of all, something that you and I are supposed to be entirely in control of ourselves, right? We've been sort of the opinion that somehow the choices you and I make are totally our own and can't really be shaped by anybody. But then, of course, what we saw was the rise of an industry that has made its business analyzing and shaping behavior at scale wherever possible. And this is not to say that they had nefarious ideas in mind. They just had discovered that our attention is an incredibly profitable product to traffic in. And so in this case, we're just looking at now a jury that, you know, even a few years ago might not have been able to wrap their minds around the idea that we can have this kind of harm by the design of a platform. That was such an abstract concept. As someone who tries to articulate that concept as often as I do, you know, I've spent years trying to get people to understand even the idea that there are armies of experts inside these companies working on that kind of idea. And now suddenly you have a jury of our peers suddenly understanding that, it seems, and as a result, finding these two companies liable. So this could absolutely rewrite the rules. Now, Will that be a rewriting of the rules that everyone will be happy with? I don't think so, right? We have enormous First Amendment issues that are going to come up with this. And you know that Meta and YouTube are going to fight tooth and nail because this is an existential threat to the way they do business. So this is not over by any stretch,
YouTube?
but I think that the era of treating our behavior as an infinite product to mine, that era is over, I think.
It's just really powerful to hear you talk about it in those terms.
My
you
God.
talk about the profits. Let's talk about the profits of these companies. Meta is worth more than $1 trillion. YouTube is worth more than $500 billion. Its parent company, Alphabet Inc., is worth more than $3 trillion. Could these companies just absorb the cost and keep doing business, find a way to keep doing business as usual?
I mean, when we look, Kristen, at the individual judgments here, right, you're looking at a $375 million judgment in New Mexico, and that's a slightly different issue. It is a different issue than the one that was settled in LA, but both of them sort of surround the idea that there is harm being done and a responsibility on the part of the companies. In both of those cases, right, you're looking at numbers that really are a rounding error in the balance sheets of these companies, of course, right? The $3 million judgment for this one plaintiff in LA, no way. But you look at the 350 other family cases coming down the pipeline. You look at the 200, those alone, if you use this math, 3 million per plaintiff, that ends up being in the billions, right? Or at least over $1 billion. If you look at the math of the school districts, 250 of which are lined up to file suit, and you think about thousands of students per school district, you're suddenly getting to some very large numbers. And so whether these companies can afford this in a dollars and cents way, I think we'll figure that out. Time will tell. But the incentive, which they did not face before now, is to change the way they do business because there is suddenly liability. In the United States, Kristen, we don't make a lot of changes to how companies do business, or companies don't make a change unless there's financial harm. This was an industry so enormous that we couldn't have imagined doing enough financial harm to make it possible for them to even consider changing. Now those incentives are shifting in a way that we haven't seen, I would say, since the era of big tobacco, since the era of lead paint, right? These are enormous kinds of judgments that have to come through for a company to consider changing how they do business. And so I just think that we're probably, even though we're going to see endless appeal, this is not by any means settled in court. I think that it is for the first time operating at a scale that really touches these companies in a very new way.
Look, before I let you go, I do have to shift gears. I want to show you this sort of extraordinary scene at the White House today.
That's
An
crazy.
AI-powered robot escorted First Lady Melania Trump into a
I think we need to watch
technology and education and open
Taylor Lawrence video on this because there's a lot more to it.
Saw this. What do we take from this moment? What are the implications?
There's a lot more
I
to
cannot
it.
believe that I'm speaking to you on
And
the
it's
same
not just
day that a jury of 12 people, decided we needed to protect kids in this whole new way, establish this entirely new idea of harm, and at the same time, you've got this imagery going on. I mean, we have the reason we're seeing these court cases move forward is because at the federal level, no one's been willing to make the kinds of laws that democracy has clearly been clamoring for. When I spoke to the Attorney General in the New Mexico case, he said, I don't want to have to do this court case by court case, but because we're not getting federal action, we have to. And when you see, I honestly don't know, Christian, but I assume that's Elon Musk's robot, right? When you see the pro-tech cabal that is in the White House now, and the ways in which they are trying to just open the floodgates for that industry, and you compare that to how the first, this jury of our peers has enacted the first real sort of democratic input into what everyday Americans want to see from these sorts of companies. The contrast between these two things could not be starker, Kristen.
All right, Jacob Ward, thank you so much for your insights today. We really appreciate it. Good to see you as always.
Thanks, Kristen.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking.
Tell me what to do.
Okay, so let's talk about this idea, this idea that Donald Trump has, where he's going to just seize all of Iran's oil and just take it over, like he did with Venezuela. I mean, he's going to have to occupy the entire country to do that. He wants to take over the oil. He would have to seize the country, the infrastructure, and somehow, turn all that into some sort of strategic or economic win for the United States. And when this news broke today, I saw Trump supporters. Yeah, that's what we need to do. Because they love it when he sounds tough.
Yeah.
They love it when he sounds like a tough guy.
Yeah.
And on its face, it does sound tough. It does sound decisive. It sounds like the kind of, blunt force solution that really plays well, especially like in his rally speeches. You know, they just eat that stuff up. But in reality, it's not just unrealistic. It is completely and wholly detached from reality and how the world actually works. If you just start with the basic premise of...
I think Donald Trump does this on purpose. He knows his base. He knows they're dumb as hell. He knows what he needs to say. He knows how to say it. And all the cameras got to do is, you know, and all he has to do is have the cameras being pointed at his face to be shown on TV, and then these dumbass Trump supporters are just gonna eat it up and think, wow, this is the coolest man ever. Look what he's doing. It's just, again, say this over and over again, we're the dumbest nation ever to have ever exist.
You know, we're just going to take the oil. You know, that phrase might have made sense in a different century when wars were fought over like visible and centralized resources, and you could just plant a flag somewhere and call it yours.
Oh yeah.
But it's 2026, and modern oil systems don't work like that. Iran's oil isn't sitting in a vault somewhere waiting to be claimed.
Right.
It's spread across dozens of massive fields, thousands and thousands of miles of pipeline, refineries, export terminals, and critically, millions of people who operate, maintain, and most importantly, defend that system. You don't just seize that. That's not a thing. You would have to invade, occupy the country, and then defend it, and then run it. And that is where this idea, if it's even an idea, it could just be ramblings of a madman. But that's where this whole thing collapses. To even begin to attempt this, the United States would have to launch a full-scale war against a country of over 90 million people with a very large military, very deep and rough terrain, and decades of preparation for exactly this. For exactly this. You're not talking about some strike.
What if he has been? You know, we've seen the video of him freaking back in the 80s talking about how he wanted to take Iran's oil. You're asking yourself, why do these people want Iran's oil? It's because they hold a lot of power, and the U.S. doesn't like to share that power. They don't want to make deals with people who don't lick their boot, and Iran hasn't licked their boot in years, decades. So for decades, the U.S. has been trying one way or another to. So for decades, the U.S. has been trying to paint the picture that Iran is our enemy. They're not. They never were. It's all been made up. So one day we can go and just snatch up all their oil. And I think to myself, they kind of did it with Iraq. Why can't they do it with Iran? I'm not too sure. I think it's just because Iraq wasn't as powerful. They didn't have the weapons. They weren't ready. They didn't watch, fight footage of the U.S. And they lost. When I mean they, I mean like Saddam Hussein, as opposed to Iran. Iran was more than ready. They're standing toe to toe. I would even say they have the edge right now. And again, if we invade, bro, if we put soldiers on Karg Island, it's gonna be a fucking massacre. I don't know.
Talking about hundreds of thousands of troops, probably 500,000 troops You're talking about years of occupation and a constant, never-ending insurgency. You guys remember insurgencies, don't you? Didn't we learn our lesson on insurgencies in Iraq? And we're going to do this for what again? For oil? Let's talk about that, because that's where this sort of logic really falls apart. The moment a war like this begins, global oil markets don't calmly just wait to see how everything's going to play out. They're not just going to sit around and just see who wins the boxing match. No, they're already panicked. They will panic more. Iran sits next, as you know, of course, to the Strait of Hormuz. One of the most, or likely the most critical shipping lane on Earth. At least this year it is, for sure. I can tell you one thing. A lot of people have learned their geography and learned about the Strait of Hormuz in the last month. But as you know, 20% of the world's oil flows through there. Right?
Me included.
In a war scenario, it doesn't help that at all, right? That would remain closed. That would absolutely remain closed. No doubt about it. That is definitely a $200 a barrel oil price scenario right there, if we did that. That's not some wild fantasy this time. I mean, it has been in the past, but now you're talking $200 oil. Gas prices in the U.S., they would go past levels that we've never seen before. $8, $9 national average, much bigger than we've ever seen before. Inflation, God knows how high inflation would go. Supply chains would just lock up. They would just stop. Airlines, trucking, manufacturing, everything that runs on fuel all gets hit at the same time. So the supposed goal of getting the oil actually triggers the exact opposite outcome. Less oil on the market, significantly higher prices, and a global economic recession.
Well, isn't that very reason why they want Iran's oil? That way we don't have to rely on anybody. You know, it's like, yeah, if we do this, it's going to suck for a couple years, but afterwards, we're going to be good. We're going to be even richer, and we don't have to rely on Iran. We don't have to live with the threat of somebody trying to cut off our supply. Is that what it is? I don't know.
Recession leading to a global economic collapse. And even if you somehow fought through all of that and physically controlled parts of Iran's oil infrastructure, you think you're just going to flip on a switch and start pumping oil? Oil production is very fragile in war, as we've already seen in the region, where about 40%
I think that's what it is, man. I'm going to lay out my prediction. Hopefully it's under 2 minutes. I think that the reason why they're doing this and they've been wanting to do this is because they don't want to rely on Iran for that oil. They're thinking by they or them, I'm talking about like U.S. government, U.S., maybe some allies. They think if we take control of Iran's oil, we don't have to rely on them anymore. And then somehow they get super duper rich or even more rich. Could that be it? And they think, oh yeah, we're going to have a bit of a recession here and costs are going to go up. But that's okay because the rich are going to get richer and people like us are the ones that's going to suffer by paying these higher prices. But within maybe like 10 years, they accomplish what they want to accomplish and they no longer have to rely on oil from Iran. And I think the way they do it is by invading and just installing U.S. backed leaders who are going to give the U.S. what we want. I'm all over the place, but that's kind of like a little bit of what I'm thinking could be it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Surrounding the Persian Gulf is either destroyed or shut in. Wells get sabotaged, pipelines get blown up, workers run away, engineers disappear, export terminals, they get bombed. You could spend literally trillions of dollars securing territory only to find out that all of that oil output collapses anyway. And every day you're trying to rebuild, and every day you're doing it under constant attack. That's not some theory. We've seen versions of this before. Infrastructure in conflict zones becomes a liability. You know, stealing another country's natural resources outright, that's not just some controversial thing. It's a direct violation of any and all international norms that sort of underpin global trade. Would our allies just, does he just expect they would quietly fall in place? Many of them would break away and markets would react, you know, not just to oil disruption, but to the realization that the rules of the system are being completely torn up. You'd be trading like temporary control of damaged oil fields for long-term damage to alliances and trade relationships and partners and economic stability. And the deeper issue, this idea treats oil like it's the center of power in some way, like it was decades ago. But the U.S. today is already the world's largest oil producer. It doesn't need to go invade another country to access energy. The global market already provides that. Is it imperfect? Yes. But it's running far more efficiently than a war ever could. So what you're left with is just another slogan. We know Donald Trump loves his slogans.
Yeah, but I don't know. Isn't that the reason though? Like, okay, so Iran shut off the Strait of Hormuz, and now all this shit is happening. Wouldn't that make the US want to have control of it? Because they think, they have all this power, but we want that power. That way this doesn't happen. Even though it's because of the US that it happened. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense.
Just a slogan, but it's a dangerous one. Because it ignores the scale of the military commitment required. And the certainty of prolonged conflict and the inevitability of global economic shock and the reality that this supposed prize, the oil, would likely be disrupted, damaged, or unusable for years. But hey, it sounds good to MAGA, right?
The long game, bro. The long game.
This is the kind of idea that sounds good to MAGA because it sounds powerful. They like to bully people. If you don't think past the first step, sounds good. I used to tell people all the time, hey, that's a great idea if you don't think about it.
I can't see past their noses, bro.
The moment you do, think about it. When you actually start to do that, you realize it leads straight into disaster and catastrophe, which is basically on par with this administration. So, yeah, that's the problem. Not just that it wouldn't work, that it couldn't work, not just that we would just give up, but that it shows a deep misunderstanding at the most fundamental level how anything works, how modern warfare works, how energy markets work.
Modern warfare?
And most importantly, how the global economy actually functions. If Donald Trump had any concept of any of these things in any way, shape, or form, he would not even utter those words. But he doesn't. He has no concept. I don't remember the guy's name. He's some podcaster. He's a left wing guy. I can't remember that guy's name. What is that guy's name? Destiny. One time he said something.
Hell no.
And I'm not gonna lie. I don't pay a lot of attention to what a lot of these people say, but he did say something one time that caught my ear when he asked someone to name one single policy issue that Donald Trump ever spoke about in any way that gave you any reason to believe he understood anything at all about anything. And it's true. He never has.
That question is for smart people who know their shit. Because, I mean, I wouldn't. It's like above my, pay grade too. We're learning here.
Knows nothing about nothing. And that is on full display right now in the worst place in the world it can possibly be on full display at, in a war with Iran.
So are you telling me that? So you telling me that Donald Trump is just a literal puppet to who though? To corporations, billionaires, and then those billionaires talk to people on his team like Vance, Stephen Miller's demonic ass, like other people on his, like within arm's reach of Donald Trump, and then Trump is just like, well, as long as I get some money out of it. Is that really what's happening? This guy's just a dumbass listening to other fucking evil fucking, oh my gosh, bro, we're
and the man sitting next to him, former Fox News host and DUI champion of the world, what's Hegseth? He's right there with Donald Trump.
Yeah, he's a fucking pendejo. He's such a fucking cosplaying baboon.
Why are you so worried about this? Like, people in everyday life that I run into. Like, they can tell I'm stressed out. Like, what are you worried about? It's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Maybe it will. I hope it will.
Maybe it will.
But the time has come. Like, our time's about up here. And I'm thinking about all of the people that were struggling in this country before this.
Mm-hmm.
Before this. And how much worse it's going to be for those people. Even in a best case scenario, if this all ended right this second, the people that were struggling in this country before this started are going to struggle significantly more. Like, those struggles are already coming, even if it ends right now. But I tell people, like, if you knew what I know, and you studied this like I do, and you understand this like I do, you would be as worried as I am.
I think the problem is that every time something happens outside of the US, like Americans don't feel it, or we feel like a small percentage of it. Like with this, we're gonna feel it in prices. Prices are gonna go sky high. And like he said, the people who were already struggling are going to struggle even more, including myself, because I'm broke as fuck. I got a job, but anyway, not about me. What else? Oh, the problem with this time is that there can only be so much fuckery until something really, really bad happens. That's why people like him, people like me who read about this stuff every day, we're worried, but because you just never know. You just never know. Is this time going to be the last time? It could.
I mean, this isn't a joke. When likely the most incompetent president this country has ever seen is leading a war against a nation like Iran. And just set aside the fact that the only reason we're there is to cover up the Epstein files.
Oh, yeah.
Set aside the fact that 13 U.S. service members have lost their lives, and God knows how many more have been just gravely injured. for that. But also having the understanding is that there is no thing that this man won't do to protect himself and the people around him.
Mm-hmm.
There is absolutely nothing. If he had to set the entire world on fire to protect himself and his buddies, he would in a heartbeat. And if he will do that,
he should
just imagine what he will do to Americans.
That way, you know, no one can fuck with you in the grave.
Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I really appreciate all my followers and subscribers. Please like and share. Hope you guys have a good week.
You start my down and even in there. Ooh, finding some volume. Okay, that one was good. Hold on, I gotta take a piss. Ooh. I think we're gonna have to call it. We've been here for an hour. You know what? We will. We shall call it. And continue tomorrow. Because I'm hungry. Got some shit to do. This video's 14 minutes long. I mean, it's not bad. It's just, you know, we got something to watch tomorrow. Yeah? Yeah? Yeah. Alrighty then.